Today's episode describes a meeting held by government officials on June 17, 1994, which decided that a special attack would be sent to Bisesero to fight the retaliation from Tutsi refugees. A letter sent by Minister Edouard Karemera to Gisenyi Army Commandant Lt Colonel Anatole Nsengiyumva on 18 June outlined the conclusion of the meeting, which was to have the Gisenyi Commandant support the Gendarmery in Kibuye and other local militiamen in the operation in the Bisesero sector of Gishyita Commune, which had become a so-called RPF heaven. The letter mentioned a deadline of 20th June 1994 to get this murderous task done. June 17th, 1994. The cabinet meeting of Kambanda's government lied about the existence of Inyenzi in Bisesero and decided to exterminate the remaining Tutsis of Bisesero. The diaries of Minister Pauline Nyiramasuhuko, Augustin Girabatware, and Edouard Karemera carry information about the June 17, 1994 government meeting and the issues discussed, including the massacres of Tutsis in Bisesero. It is clear from the diaries of these ministers that the issue of Tutsis' presence in Bisesero was the main topic of the day. Nyiramasuhuko wrote that there was Inyenzi in Gishyita Commune, Bisesero sector. Karemera's diary shows the decision taken for the Tutsis in Bisesero, whom they called Inyenzi. He wrote that the government had decided that a special attack should be sent on Bisesero with the help of the government soldiers from Gisenyi not later than June 20th, 1994. Karemera wrote, "The government decides that a heavy intervention should be sent to Bisesero, and if need be, with support from Gisenyi, and that should be done not later than 20th June, 1994. The cabinet meeting also decided that in order to achieve this goal, additional weapons would have to be provided to the Interahamwe militia through the Autodefense Civile program in order to carry out the killings." Nyiramasuhuko noted in her diary that the Bisesero people are well known in the history of Rwanda as warriors since the time of the monarchy, former feudal warrior agents, and some of their descendants had joined the RPF, including Denis Polisi. Nyiramasuhuko also wrote that Biseruka, a former RPF senior officer who had been in Habyarimana's government army, had selected Bisesero as the site for the struggle to liberate Gisenyi. Nyiramasuhuko wrote that it indicated that the RPF would attack Gisenyi through Bisesero and Kabuhanga, which is why there was an urgent need for special operation, heavy operation in Bisesero. The plan to attack Bisesero is also reflected in Girabatware's diary, where he wrote that it has been decided to put more effort into the war and to do it everywhere. It was also decided at the meeting that in order to protect the infrastructure in Bisesero district against the attacks by the government soldiers and Interahamwe, it was necessary to send gendarmes and veterans to protect them. The infrastructure which were mentioned were electricity power plants, Gisovu tea factory, Karongi TV and radio towers, and Kretnil Zail project activities. This was a strong indication of the genocidal plot where infrastructure was considered more valuable than the lives of Tutsis. Authorities involved in the massacres of Tutsis in Bisesero included ministers from Kibuye, Karemera Edouard, Niyitegeka Eliezer, Ndindabahizi Emmanuel, Prefet Kayishema Clement, and Musema Alfred, who was the director of the Gisovu tea factory. They were all convicted of genocide crimes by the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda, ICTR, and sentenced to life imprisonment. Niyitegeka and Kayishema died in prison. Others involved were Burugumestre Ndimbati Alois of Gisovu and Burugumestre Tsukubwabo Charles of Gishyita. Both are wanted by the international justice. There were also Munyakazi Yusuf and Ruzindana Obed, who was sentenced to 25 years in prison by the ICTR. Another issue found in the diary of Nyiramasuhuko, which was on the agenda of June 17, 1994 government meeting, was the conduct of Colonel Bavugamenshi Innocent, who was the commander of the Gendarmery in Cyangugu Prefecture. Nyiramasuhuko wrote that Lieutenant Colonel Singirankabo Claudien was in charge of the Autodefense Civile activities in Cyangugu and that he had said that their actions were being obstructed by the behavior of Colonel Bavugamenshi, who did not want to kill. The two senior officers were from Cyangugu. Colonel Bavugamenshi was appointed to Cyangugu on April 20th, 1994, to replace Major Munyarugerero Innocent from Ruhengeri, who played a key role in the massacres of Tutsis in Cyangugu in collaboration with Lieutenant Imanishimwe Samuel, Prefect Bagambiki, and Sous-Prefet Kamonyo Emmanuel, Munyangabe Theodore, Terubura Gerard, and others. On his arrival in Cyangugu, Colonel Bavugamenshi Innocent refused to commit genocide, doing all he could to fight for the Tutsis. He was the one who put trusted gendarmes around the Nyarushishi Tutsi camp to guard them. He had instructed them to protect Tutsis and told them to use their weapons in case Interahamwe militia would come near the camp to pick Tutsis to kill. The government was also pleased that the Autodefense Civil killing program was owned by the populace, with the contribution of about 22 million from the population in the continuation of the genocide. As the RPF Inkotanyi forces defeated the killers and stopped the genocide, some burgomestres and other government officials fled for fear of being arrested and held accountable for their killings. The government replaced many of them during the June 17, 1994 meeting. The following authorities were appointed, and they were all extremists who supported the genocide plot. In the Ministry of Finance, the following were appointed: the Director of Cabinet, Ntirigirumwe Gervais; Political and Legal Advisor, Vainqueur Alphonse; the Director General, Nahondi Félicien; the Governor of the National Bank, Ntirugirimbabazi Denis; the Director General of the Rwanda Development Bank, BRD, Gasamunyiga Frodoir. The following 15 bourgmestres were also appointed: in Ruhengeri Prefecture, Kinigi Commune, Hagumimana Etienne; Mukingo, Kajerijeri Juvenal; in Butare Prefecture, the Prefect, Lieutenant Colonel Nteziryayo Alphonse; Nyabisindu Commune, Gironsanga Vincent; Rusatira Commune, Kandagaye Jean-Marie Vianney; Muganza, Ndayambaje Eli; and Ndora, Uwizeye Fidèle. In Gitarama Prefecture, Masango Commune, Mwanafunzi Anter; Nyabikenye, Musabyimana Vedaste; Nyakabanda, Nsabimana Camille; Musambira, Karani Dominique. In Gisenyi, Nyamyumba Commune, Nzitabakuze Henry. In Kigali City and Kigali-Ngari, Kicukiro Commune, Karanganwa Gerard; Kanombe, Nduwayezu Jean; Tare, Rukimbira Léodomir; Butamwa, Muhizina Sébastien. According to Edouard Karemera's diary, the cabinet meeting of June 17, 1994, also highlighted the misunderstandings between the government and its military. He noted that the military criticized the government that ministers and other officials are fleeing the area which had problems, seeking refuge, especially in areas close to borders with foreign countries, rather than joining the military on the battlefield. Karemera wrote that one of the highlights of the issue was the low attendance of ministers at government meetings, as only 9 ministers were present on the date. Another indication of the frustration of Kambanda's criminal government was the fact that senior officials, including ministers, were interested in taking their families abroad. It showed that collaboration between members of the cabinet was limited. On June 18, 1994, the Minister of Interior and Communal Development, Karemera Edouard, from Mwendo Commune in Kibuye, wrote a letter explaining how the killings of Tutsis in Bisesero should be carried out. Minister Karemera wrote to the Army Commander in Gisenyi Prefecture, Lieutenant Colonel Nsengiyumva Anatole, informing him of the operation to kill Tutsis in Bisesero in the following words: to the Army Commander, I would like to inform you that during the cabinet meeting of this Friday, June 17, 1994, the government decided to ask the commander of Gisenyi Operational Sector to support the Gendarmery in Kibuye and the local population in the operation in the Bisesero sector of Gishyita Commune, which has become the RPF haven. The government requests that this operation be completed by the end of June 20, 1994. In the absence of the Minister of Defense, who is on a mission abroad, the Minister of Interior and Communal Development has been mandated to inform you of this decision and to ensure its follow-up. The Prefect of Kibuye Prefecture and the Commander of Kibuye Army Grouping copied in this letter are required to follow up on the prerequisite to facilitate the implementation of this operation on the prescribed deadlines. The authorities who received a copy of the letter were the following: Prime Minister Kambanda, Minister of Defense Bizimana Augustin, Prefect of Kibuye Dr. Kaishema Clement, and Commander of the Gendarmery in Kibuye, Major Jabo Jean-Baptiste. This meant that these authorities had been tasked with implementing the government plan outlined in the Kambanda's government's meeting resolution of 17th June 1994, calling for the killings of Tutsis in Bisesero. Let us recall that the Minister of Defense Bizimana Augustin was on a mission in Cameroon, and his interim was Colonel Theoneste Bagosora, who also led genocidal activities related to the Ministry of Defense. The words used in this letter from Minister Karemera are enough to make it clear that the massacres of Tutsis was planned and led by the government through its forces and authorities at various levels, including youth of Interahamwe and Impuzamigambi militia. It undeniably showed that the genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda was a government-planned killing. That is why various ministers of the Kambanda's government have been arrested and tried by the international justice system, which many of them were convicted of genocide crimes and crimes against humanity. The convicts of the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda, ICTR, include the Prime Minister, Jean Kambanda, Minister of Local Government and Communal Development, Edouard Karemera, Minister of Finance, Emmanuel Ndindabahizi, Minister of Planning, Augustin Girabatware, Minister of Information, Eliezer Niyitegeka, Minister of Higher Education and Research, Jean Dodier Kamuhanda, Minister of Family, Pauline Nyiramasuhuko, Minister of Youth and Organization, Calix Nzabonimana. As for the Minister of Justice, Agnes Namabyariro, she was convicted of genocide crimes by the justice system in Rwanda. Others convicted of genocide crimes in the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda, ICTR, as evidence of the government's role in planning and carrying out the massacres of Tutsis include the following senior officers: Colonel Theoneste Bagosora, Colonel Tarsis Renzaho, Colonel Alois Simba, Colonel Ephraim Setako, Lieutenant Colonel Anatole Nsengiyumva, Lieutenant Colonel Alphonse Neziryayo, Lieutenant Colonel Tarsis Muvunyi, Major Alois Nhabakuze, Captain Ildefonse Nizeyimana, Lieutenant Ildefonse Hategekimana, and Lieutenant Samuel Imanishimwe. Major Bernard Nuyahaga was also convicted of genocide by the Brussels court in Belgium, and Captain Pascal Simbikangwa was convicted of genocide crimes by the Paris court in France. Others convicted of genocide crimes by the ICTR include senior government officials, including Calix Karimanzira, Director General in the Ministry of Interior and Communal Development, Jean Bosco Barayagwiza, Director General of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Mathieu Ngirumhatse, President of the MRND Party at the national level, François Karera, Prefect of Kigali-Ngari, Sylvain Sabimana, Prefect of Butare, Clément Kaishema, Prefect of Kibuye, Dominique Naokuriryayo, the Sous-Prefet of Gisagara, Laurent Semanza, the Burgomaestre of Bichumbi Commune, Juvenal Rugambarara, who replaced Semanza, Paul Bisengimana, Burgomaestre of Gikoro, Joseph Kanyabashi, Burgomaestre of Ngoma, Eli Ndayambaje, Burgomaestre of Muganza, Juvenal Kajerijeri, Burgomaestre of Mukingo, Jean-Baptiste Gatete, Burgomaestre of Murambi Commune, Sylvestre Gachumbitsi, Burgomaestre of Rusumo, and Jean-Paul Akayesu, Burgomaestre of Taba. Ladislas Ntaganzwa, former Burgomaestre of Nyakizu, was transferred by the ICTR to be tried by Rwandan courts and was convicted of genocide crimes and sentenced to life imprisonment. Other convicts of the genocide by the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda include religious people, Father Emmanuel Rukundo and Father Tanas Seromba, who ordered the demolition of Nyange Church on Tutsis who had taken refuge there. These cases clearly show that all administrative levels carried out the genocide, emphasizing that the genocide against the Tutsi was a crime planned and carried out by the government. There are documents showing how Kibuye was especially targeted by the genocide under the government's willpower. The fact that the genocide was carried out everywhere except in Bisesero till June 1994, where there was still resistance, called the attention of all government agencies. There are two letters of Prefect Clément Kaishema, dated June 9, 1994, and June 12, 1994, addressed to the Minister of Interior and Communal Development, Edouard Karemera, who was from Kibuye in the former Mwendo Commune, requesting to carry out what he called ratissage, meaning hunting or elimination, in the Bisesero sector where Tutsis were still alive. In his response on June 20th, 1994, Minister Karemera wrote a letter to Prefet Kayishema informing him that the cabinet meeting held on June 17, 1994, had decided that the commander of the army in Gisenyi Military Division, Lieutenant Colonel Anatole Nsengiyumva, will send troops to assist the Gendarmery of Kibuye to attack Bisesero not later than June 20, 1994. Minister Karemera reminded Prefet Kayishema that after the decision of the cabinet, he wrote to his counterpart Minister of Defense, Augustin Bizimana, urging him to immediately comply with the decision of the government. Also, Karemera informed Prefet Kayishema that the Minister of Defense had executed it because he had written to all the concerned military commanders on June 20, 1994, urging them to comply with the instructions. Furthermore, Karemera requested Prefet Kayishema to do his utmost to monitor the implementation of the operation in Bisesero to mobilize people of Gishyita, Gisovu, and Gitesi communes, and to report to Minister Karemera on the course of the massacres in Bisesero. Minister Karemera concluded the letter of June 20, 1994, telling Prefect Kayishema that the government was ready to provide all the necessary weapons for the operation, including the protection of infrastructure such as Gisovu Tea Factory and the Karongi Electrogas headquarters. On June 23, 1994, Prefet Kayishema wrote a letter to the commander of the Kibuye Gendarmery, Major Jabo Jean-Baptiste, of which subject was security in Bisesero. In his letter, Prefet Kayishema informed Major Jabo that in connection with the implementation of the content of the letter written by the Minister of Interior on June 20, 1994, regarding the attacks on Bisesero, Kayishema informed Major Jabo that awareness among the people of the commune close to Bisesero had been intensified and that it had been done since the last 2 months of April and May, adding the statement, open quotes, as you also know, close quotes, which was like showing that they both knew the plan. A new thing mentioned by Kayishema in the letter was that he told the commander of Kibuye Gendarmery that for the operation to exterminate Tutsis of Bisesero to start, they needed the equipment and people for support, which would come in support of the initiative implemented by the Gendarmery and the Interahamwe from Gisenyi on June 20, 1994. Kayishema went on to tell the Kibuye Gendarmery commander that the operation needed to be monitored and carried out as soon as possible so that it could be implemented without delay, so that it would not face any difficulties of not achieving its desired goal. In order to improve preparation for the massacres of Tutsis in Bisesero, soldiers from Gisenyi, ordered by Lieutenant Colonel Anatole Nsengiyumva, assisted the gendarmes in Kibuye as it had been requested by the government. In addition, with the help of several Interahamwe militia from the special gang called Turihose from Gisenyi, they joined forces with those from Mugonero, led by Obed Ruzindana and his brother, Joseph Mahambara, and those from Cyangugu in Bugarama, led by Yusuf Munyakazi. All these Interahamwe militia were transported by Natracom government buses and were gathered in Gishyita market, where they joined those from Kibuye, especially those from Gishyita, Gisovu, and Rwamatamu communes, led by Michael Muhimana, Vincent Rutaganira, and Burgumestre Aloys Ndimbati of Gisovu, Charles Sikubwabo of Gishyita, Abeli Furere of Rwamatamu, Alfred Musema, who ran Gisovu Tea Factory, and others. The killers attacked Bisesero on June 27, 1994. They destroyed the Tutsis who are still fighting the Interahamwe militia in the Bisesero Hills. The attacks lasted for 3 days, and they were carried out in the eyes of French troops who had reached Bisesero as they were camping in Gishyita, within 3 kilometers of the site of the massacre in Bisesero Hills. More than 2,000 Tutsis from Bisesero were exterminated in just those 3 days. The government meeting on June 20, 1994, considered the rapid elimination of Tutsis across the country and launched Opération Insecticide, which started in Bigogo military camp. The use of the term insecticide as a pesticide was to compare Tutsis to the Inyenzi, cockroaches, and they had to be killed with insecticide as soon as possible. Opération Insecticide was assigned to a French captain, Paul Baril. Opération Insecticide consisted of 2 parts. The first one was related to the immediate extermination of Tutsis in the country who were considered as accomplices of Inkotanyi. The second one which Captain Barry launched in Bigogwe military base, was to sensitize each military and the Interahamwe militia in order to motivate them on their ability to fight and take over the region controlled by the RPF. According to Nyamasuko's diary, as part of Operation Insecticide, the cabinet decided to continue implementing all the Autodefense Civil regulations as announced by the government on May 25, 1994, to increase the supply of mortar guns 82, 105, 120, and 122, and R4 ammunitions. The cabinet meeting also decided to find a way to fight the infiltration in its controlled areas and decided to do everything possible to restore the parts lost to the war. Thank you for listening to another episode of Kwibuka Podcast. As always, make sure you leave us a review, sharing what you like about the podcast, and share with others who would be interested in listening.